This is Doja Talks with me, Giovanni Vinello. Now, Doja Talks is a show where we discuss with the best sales and marketing professionals in the world of wine, spirits, and beverages in general. Our guest today is Amayés Aouli. Amayés is the global head of wine and spirits at Bonhams, one of the world's best auction houses. Now, Amayés told me that the biggest sale that he closed was an 180,000 euros bottle, and that's a truly mind-blowing number. And in this episode, we will actually go through how these prices are set, how they influence the overall wine market, and actually how can wineries approach the wine auction world. Amayés has also a ton of knowledge and insights on market and consumer trends, so we'll also discuss how we can attract young people to the world of wine, and also which are the new export markets following the USA tariffs. So I hope you enjoyed the show. As always, remember to subscribe and leave a review on Spotify, and if you have any feedback, ideas or suggestions, my email is giovanni@getdolia.com. Hello Amayés, welcome to Doja Talks.
Hello, Giovanni. Thank you for having me.
So I would like to start from an interview you gave recently, which I read, where you said something which actually I think it's quite interesting. You said, when the market is having different dynamics, the auction is an echo chamber of the market. So I was curious, what's the current state of the wine auction market, and what do you think it's telling us about the market trends in the wine industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the auction is the most transparent of all players, whether we like it or not. That's just a pure fact, right? The prices are known, even our margin or buyer's premium is known. So you can extract many trends from the auction market. And when the market is up, you need the auction to break some records, but it's kind of like one of the players. When the market is soft and even declining, that's exactly where it plays its most important role of being a barometer. And again, the market, funnily enough, and it's kind of counterintuitive, has not been as high in terms of volume of transaction as and when the market of wine went down for roughly the past 2 years. So it's an echo chamber because you can tell which producers still hold its value. Some producers are falling, same for regions, same for countries, same for different price points, and not talking about the difference between wine and spirits. So the market for auction is effectively very vibrant, very dynamic. And then we've got many sub-trends that we're probably going to discuss in this episode.
And did you see, maybe from the beginning of your experience, something changed in the past years in the market in terms of trends? Which regions are most popular? Did you see some changes, some macro changes?
Yeah, you've got many macro changes. Again, like we can go from the buyers to the producers, we can go in terms of prices, etc. But let me try to summarize it, let's say, in two main aspects. The first one is in terms of one region. So spoiler alert, Burgundy has been on the rise for the past 15 years. And it's a suitable, let's say, one region for auction because it's rare by default, right? When you think about one of the most iconic names, Domaine de la Romanée Conti, if you take the Romanée Conti, we're talking 6,000 bottles for virtually and conceptually 8 billion people. So like, this is an auction material in itself. It's much more difficult for the heavy producers, so namely Bordeaux, for instance, whereby you've got hundreds of thousands of the same wine hitting the market constantly. And so Burgundy is much more, it's smaller, it's adventurous, it's like plays by curiosity, etc. So every region with by default an embedded rarity will probably tend to do a bit better in the auction as a mechanism. And the second one is, let's say, on the buyer side. You've got a huge rise, and you have seen a huge rise, especially since 2008 from Asia, because Hong Kong has lowered the tax to zero, the duties. So it's effectively a free port for wine and funneling through all Asia. Apart China, who's now becoming more and more an excellent producer of fine wine, the rest of the region is not producing. So needs to import 100%, let's say 99% of the fine wine they're consuming. And then the second biggest market being in the US. And for probably a different reason, but the US consumer has been much more sophisticated. We've seen a lot of groups, a lot of journalists, a lot of critics, a lot of knowledge coming from the US. And so from Asia to the US, you've got now a global market, assuming that Europe and especially the UK has always been, let's say, for the past 200 years, a place to exchange the finest wine in the world. So now you've got these three pillars in terms of buyer, and effectively most of that trends are very new, if not in the past 10 years.
Okay. And you mentioned duties. Did you see an impact of the recent tariffs that the US imposed? And do you think it actually will have a larger impact? Because I'm hearing different perspectives. Someone tells me it will not be as big as we expect. Someone tells me it's a disaster. So where actually do you think the needle stands?
It's probably too soon to tell. The tariff has came into place less than a year ago, and so the world of wine is not moving as fast in that respect. So a lot of stock are already in the US, so they are without the tariff. The first signal we can see is, funnily enough, and it's completely counterintuitive, all our wine auction in the US are doing great. We're like close to 100% sell all the time. You've got a rebound of interest from client because mechanically you've creating a kind of barrier, right? A barrier to entry. And so all the stock that are already there are slightly higher in terms of price. It's too soon to tell because, again, we need to see how long it's going to last. We're seeing a lot of bonded warehouse in the US, which is a new concept because there was no tariff before. So now we see, especially on the East Coast, the capacity of people to store their wine in a bonded way. And then for the biggest collectors, for the biggest trade, they, by default and before the tariff, have a global warehouse system. They've got account in many warehouses. So you can be like a collector from New York, but having part of your wine in London, in France, less so in Hong Kong. So you can delay your shipping and your arrival. And that we see at the fine end of the market. US, just to finish, US is a wine producer as well of extremely good quality. Everyone think about California, but other states like Oregon, for instance, are producing exceptional wines and more so after every vintage. So it's very complex between the domestic dynamic, the international dynamics, how long we think the tariff will stay in place. And so, yeah, question mark.
Are there actually, my personal curiosity, are those wines you mentioned from the US popular in Europe? Or do we tend to stick more to France, Italy, and to the traditional European regions?
So it's starting to. Not
Okay.
sure there is a massive market. I think it's starting, especially for the top wine, like Screaming Eagle, Opus One, Island Estate. It's kind of like iconic name from the US, but by default, it's probably the most expensive wine to produce in the first place because you need manpower, you need like extremely high insurance costs due to the fires, for instance. So producing a bottle in California already ex-domain direct break-even is already extremely high. If you add the taxes, the exchange rates, and the shipping, it's very difficult to compete with the old Europe, whereby for like 30, 40 euros, you're starting to find absolutely extremely well-made wine. So the competition is by default a little bit biased by that. So I don't think there is a big market for them there, but for branding, they need to be present across the globe. Yeah.
Mhm. And so you before you mentioned those like big names, Romane Conti, these wines, you say the ones that get actually sold the most are the most premium ones. What do you think drives this premium positioning? We can also say perception, maybe. So, is it branding? Is it the reviews? Is it just the price? So, what do you think are the factors that actually drive this positioning?
There is a wonderful group called R&E Global, and it's the first think tank around fine wine. And they're spending hours, days, weeks of seminars trying to define what is fine wine and what is not. Because in our category, we've got that question mark, right? When it's art and when it's craftsmanship, right? So it's very difficult to draw a line. I would say in a simple way that that's the connection between a terroir, the winemaker, and then global recognition. So if you've got the three, and global recognition can be, books, critics, communication to the world, tasting, etc. If you've got the three of them, and if you add a fourth element, which is consistency, i.e. you're not doing great one year and then you walk away, etc. So you add that for 10, 15, 20 years so that people can test your like vintage, you produce a consistent brand, then you usually becoming a fine wine, kind of regardless of the region, right? Like sometimes the region helps you, sometimes the region draws you back if you want to be on top of our pyramid. But like you can have names completely agnostic of their region, right? You can think about Emmanuel Reynaud for Rayas, for instance, at La Grange des Pères in Languedoc. You've got this kind of winemaker and terroir that are standouts toward their region. So I think that's probably the best way of saying what is a fine wine and what is not. It needs to be widely recognized. And just to finish, I think it's exactly when wine is becoming closer to fine arts, right? You can have beautiful artists nearby, young creators, etc., but they need to have this worldwide recognition, and that takes time. That takes, a lot of people to appreciate the artwork.
Okay. So what you're saying basically, because it also was one of my curiosities, let's say you cannot intentionally create an investment grade wine. So you need a lot of work before, and then maybe at some point it will arrive.
Yeah, so first, I don't think wine is a good investment material, right? It's probably the
Okay.
most sensitive product ever produced by mankind. It's complicated to move, to ship. As we say, it's sensitive to every single tariff and so on and so forth. So when you think about it, it's like, equity is better, right? Like in 5 milliseconds, I can buy a Tesla and Apple stock in my phone and like walk away, right? So it's not an investment grade element. The time will enhance its rarity, will enhance its taste profile, and probably, if you pick the right one, will enhance its global recognition. So there are some names, there are some winemaker whereby you can buy a bottle at like 100 euro and then it's becoming 10,000, but that's probably not for us, that's for our children. Probably take more than a generation to realize that fully. And so you cannot make intentionally an investment grade wine. You can invest in a winery, you can invest in the people, you can invest in talents, you can do that, and hopefully some people are doing that for pleasure, for joy. But so apart if you're a winery, apart if you do just buying a collection of wine that you like, that you love, that you know the guy, that's probably the two best advices if there is a financial return. But again, I would say that's not the main purpose and the perfect vehicle to do so.
I'm trying to think from the perspective of a wine producer maybe is listening to this. Okay. Does it make sense for someone to start thinking in the future? Like, how can I make this wine a wine that actually can go in an auction and get sold for 100,000 euros? So my question would be, does it make sense as a strategy for a producer thinking as if that wine would be sold at an auction in 10 years or 15 years?
So I would tell him this is the wrong objective. Being sold at auction is not the correct objective. And usually, what I see in the world in general is like failure to express what is the right objective. What you're trying to say is, will my wine be appreciated in 10, 15, 20 years' time? And that's probably the best objective. And if your wine is appreciated, sought after, that's you've got a community of people that recognize your name, recognize your work, love to share your wine, love to give it to their doctors, lawyers, to their friends, etc., etc. Then by default and as a consequence, the prices will go. And auction being just a mechanism, a transparent mechanism, then it will go as a consequence, but never as a primary objective. And guess what? The top names currently at auction now, they were not made with that, let's say, value creation element. They were made just by pleasure, by consistency, by chemistry, by heart, but they were not made to be at some point at auction. If you think about Henri Jaillet, for instance, who's probably one of the most iconic producers in the wine world, he had a philosophy completely contrarian to his time, and he's considered as an artist. And so every single bottle at auction now is even more priced because he was considered as an artist. And right after his last vintages, his domain was separated into two cousins for the exact same terroir. The prices are, 10% of what they were when it was Henri Jaillet, because the terroir matters, don't get me wrong, but it was his soul and his name and his signature that was appreciated by the market. So again, I don't think you can create with that in view. And if you think about an artist, many of the artists, they start poor and they spend most of their time in that current state before at the end of like 10, 20, 30 years of production, the market realize that, oh my God, this is great art. Same for wine.
And so I would like to come back to this because also you make this comparison with fine arts, and we discussed about, of course, fine wines, and you need quality, consistency. In this podcast, we talk a lot also about marketing and communication. Where does marketing communication stand in the fine wine market? So my first question would be, do fine wines actually need marketing communication? And the second would be, how can you actually tell this story? Because I cannot think of a famous artist who did crazy marketing communications. I mean, in the end, you become known because of the quality of your work, no?
Yes and no. It's because probably you and I have a different meaning of marketing. When you think marketing, you think modern marketing. Like you think about, I don't know, social media, emails, campaigns, etc. The marketing as a whole is the art of telling a story. It's how to market a story, right? If you write a book on whatever chateau, that's marketing, right? You having a book, beautifully made, well written, with beautiful pictures. This is like marketing, let's say in the noble sense of the term, quote unquote, right? So if you do a tasting in, I don't know, a beautiful hotel in Los Angeles, right? That's marketing, right? You bringing your wine towards the end of the world in the Pacific coast, and you meeting 20 clients. If you do a wine dinner in South Korea, so all of that is effectively marketing. If you host people to your domain, to your winery, and you just select them carefully, if you do a video, if you do a movie, all of that is marketing. And I think so marketing in that sense is important, in the noble sense of the term, right? And when you think about many of the top domains now, they're actually doing a lot. They're doing conferences, they're doing action, they're doing movie, they're doing a cultural production. How many books you've got on ICAM, on Domaine de la Romanée Conti? How many UNESCO appreciation has been made from Burgundy, from Champagne? So all of that is effectively part of, let's say, real marketing, and not just pushing beautiful pictures on Instagram. That's one part of it, and that can work for, Champagne, for instance, which is much more consumable than any other region. It can work for some Italian wine, some French wine that are meant to be consumed fast and not being aging. But for the fine wine, there is marketing too.
And who is let's say, the typical profile of someone who buys this wine and listens to this communication and is the target of these marketing activities? So what do you see is the target people, and if you can draw a picture of someone that buys this wine at auctions?
So again, if we are the echo chambers of the world, we're the echo chambers of humanity as well. So we've got a myriad,
Yeah.
and literally there is no client looking like the other one. But okay, I can see some patterns for the sake of the conversation. So first, our client base is roughly 70% individual and 30% trade. So let's exclude the trade because it's like kind of mechanical, the fine wine merchant, if you want. For the individual, let's say you've got like three main categories, right? You've got the very young, so under 35, 40 years old, he's starting a collection, right? He's starting to collect. He has done the first part of the journey with, tasting, reading books, getting interested, etc. He's mainly located in top cities like New York, London, Paris, Hong Kong, this kind of place. And he's starting to have an income whereby, he wants to have a bit of fun and to search some special wine. We like this kind of profile because it means that if well handled, it's going to be a long-term client, and then he's going to buy more than he can consume, probably resell and continue the journey. So it's a fun client base, and it's kind of important. We believe that probably 30% of our bidders are below 40 years old, right? And we work a lot trying to get that younger and younger again. The second part will be, let's say, more than 45 years old, so much more mature, much more, well advanced in the career, etc. And he's going to buy more quantity. Effectively, he's got more power, so he's going to solidify a collection. And the final one is probably after 60, 65 years old, depends, whereby either he's going to sell, to disinvest a lot, and we need both to play. We're brokering between people of that age to the younger crowd, but he will still have some, focus. So he's probably going to buy the highest price, but in lesser quantity. And so ideally, it's of course not an ideal world, but ideally you have these three groups competing on each auction, depending on the curation, etc. And you can multiply them by location. And you've got variation between Asian, US, and European clients, but roughly speaking, it falls into these three demographics.
So you said something that's quite interesting. We are trying to attract as much young people as possible. So I think this can be interesting, since you are the echo chamber of the world, as a general point of view for all wine producers. So how do you attract, and which are the main strategies to attract young people to the world of wine, in particular of fine wine? Because what we read is not really clear, but what we read is that young generations are not necessarily as into wine as older one generations. So how do you see this trend? And actually, what do you think are the best ways of attracting these people, these young consumers, to this world?
Yeah, well, attracting is probably not the perfect word because they're already they're already attracted, and again, they need to have done few wine courses and being interested in the first place, right? We cannot attract someone that never had a glass of wine in his life and then okay, let's bid on a cool wine now. So you need to have done a bit of your journey, but it's effectively by providing knowledge, experience, good marketing. So we're doing events all the time, everywhere in the world. Can be wine tasting, wine dinners, can be conferences, can be videos. You know, I have a really strong social media presence. But effectively, I think the way young people are attracted is by human connection. So if you spend a dinner with them, yeah, best friend forever. Not because you see what I mean. Not because they are wired differently, but because I think we're at a time of humanity where we value a lot human connection. And if you spend an hour, 6 hours with someone, it means a lot, much more than before, because you had like 1,000 of other 1 hour that you can have spent completely differently, starting with yourself. So the value of human connection is high. Meeting the producers, we're doing a lot of partnership with producers, Ornellaia in Italy, and you know Delamare in France, and Delaunay in Burgundy, and so on and so forth. Primarily for that reason, because we can host dinner with them and test wine that no one had the chance to test in the presence of the winemaker, with some support from Bonhams and from us.
So of course, I'm part of me is also a tech person. So is there some technology involved in this world of auctions? Just maybe to see if there's some tech opportunities in the future.
So not enough, Giovanni, not enough. We are old. We're old house of 330 years old, but yes. So technology is coming at its own speed. I can give you some examples. For instance, when we price wine, we now are helped by let's call it AI to make it simple, but so with like a data that is going to be fed into a system, into a platform. Same for the targeting. Depending on the wine we're putting at auction, we've got pockets of people that are going to be targeted more. Of course, we do have the social media, let's say regular kits of Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, some ads, some profiling as well there. But that's, to me, on one side, extremely important to add some technology to be faster, to be more efficient, to be more targeted. But the world of wine is effectively, and you cannot do nothing about it, about experience. So it's a support, definitely. It makes us faster, 100%. But ultimately, it's meant to be shared, to be enjoyed, and it has the only capacity, which is actually magical almost, to transform time into memory. So time is going the same way for everyone in the world, but the memory is probably something very, very precious. So fine wine has this capacity of making a commodity something unique.
And so if I think of, let's say, this profile that you described to me, there's a lot of things aside from wine that they might purchase. There might be some other luxury item, some clothing, some luxury cars, houses, for example. Where do you think wine and fine wine is positioned inside of this portfolio of investments or of ownership? Do you think it can be actually perceived as similar as another luxury slash expensive item, or do you think it has a different position?
So two questions, one for consumption and one for investment. Let me split the two. So I'm sitting in a global auction house with, as you said, is offering watches, jewelry, cars, paintings, of course, furniture, design, and so on and so forth. The main difference between other categories, like you need wine all the time, right? That the only product eventually either you or someone is going to destroy one day by pulling the cork and transforming that into memory. You don't destroy your watch, and hopefully you don't destroy your car. And so ideally you keep it for the next generation or as long as you can. Wine is not meant for that. So virtually, again, probably the wine auction my team and I are running are for 90% of the client base at Bonhams, which is not true on the other side, right? Like how many watch you buy per month, that I don't know, probably anywhere close to zero. And how many bottle of wine you can buy per month, probably more than zero. So effectively, we are a transversal category that fits to everyone and anyone. And by the way, we're talking about the higher price because it's what's impacting our mind, but we sell bottles starting from like 50, 80 euros or USD, right? So it's not just the top DRC and the top Petrus. It is literally fine wine. That's our border, but suitable for every price point. And then when it comes to investment, which is again for wine is a little bit quote unquote, right? Because you're going to drink some. There is a concept in fine wine which is very fun. It's effectively the wine is going to improve in price by the time. So give it one more year to whatever cool wine, and mechanically, conceptually, it will be rarer, and it will be a bit more expensive. Which again doesn't happen in art or in watches, right? Like some artists can fall because it's not trendy anymore, and so on and so forth. So you've got people investing with that view. The only question mark is the time horizon. And if you do that with wine, you probably need to be ready for a good 10, 15, 20 years and not trying to flip over 2-3 years, which you can probably more do with fine arts and with watches, and be there when the market is down and resell when the market is up. That's probably something you can do. Again, I'm a little bit beyond my area of knowledge and expertise, but for wine, usually what I find is people is lacking a longer time horizon and expecting to have shorter one. It's not fitting with the category.
Do people buy to drink or to resell?
Okay, let's put the trade aside, right? The trade,
Yeah.
they're here to sell, right? This is a job, and guess what? They are like, in the streets, you can Google their name and etc. That's their job. For individual, believe it or not, I've never met someone who just buying without consuming. What I met 99% of the time is people buying much more than they can possibly consume. Because guess what? There is a limit of what you can consume per day. And so if you're buying more than that, then effectively you're starting a collection. But it's almost impossible, and conceptually it won't work just to buy without being interested, without sharing, without drinking, without having this path there. And the thing is the following, is like, if you don't buy with passion, you will tend to buy the high names that are high because of whatever. And guess what? The higher you are, the more likely the prices will go down. And the more you know, the more early you will find the next names. So it's effectively, you have no other route than reading, meeting, sharing, going to the vineyard, attending tasting, so that you will recognize the name that will go. So if you want to go the investment route, you need to do that with passion. If not, mechanically, that won't work.
And I want to come back to something you said before. So you said it might happen that some artist actually goes a bit down in popularity because maybe they go out of fashion, or some new artist might emerge. And it happens that actually young artists emerge from nowhere, or if I can think also of fashion, it happens more and more often that new brands, which are much less flashy, without like huge names, huge brands, actually become a lot popular in the luxury segment, no? So you see a lot of people buying some new unknown brand instead of Louis Vuitton or other brands. So my question is, do you think there's space in the wine market also for this to happen? So will we see some new producers with modern names, a bit unknown names, younger brands, which might actually become fine wines or reach that level?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, wine and art are absolutely related into that. So just before technology, and to come back into more your space, before technology, if you're an artist or winemaker, you're encapsulated into a gender, if you want, right? You're impressionist, or you're modern art, or you're whatever. Same for wine. You're Burgundian producers, Bordeaux producer, Champagne, Piemonte, Tuscany, etc. Now with technology, you've got much more direct access, right? And if you're cool, if you're crazy, if your wine is good, you can skip out that path. And that's why you've got independent fashion producers, independent artists, independent winemaker that are not part of a group, not part of a school, not part of a region, and that can go like that. So the time to recognize your value is actually made faster by the capacity of broadcasting it. And it happens in singing, right? Like you can have someone like after 3 weeks, oh my God, the sound is great. Like you don't need to belong to hip hop or classical school or whatever, and then take 10 years to get known. And that's probably a good thing for technology. The bad thing is like, hey, where's the consistency here? Because I don't want to live in a world whereby it's like flashy pop stars for 2 weeks and then move on and move it again. I think it will be, brand tiring. But apart from that small drawbacks, I think that it has a lot of effect. And we start to see that. We start to see producers from regions that are lesser known and, some innovative person here or there. that are actually doing better than the established region. The same trend we see like some counterexample, like you take Chateau Lafleur, for instance, which is one of the most iconic wine producers in Pomerol. They decided this year to get out from the Pomerol appellation so that they don't have any rules to follow, guidelines, mainly on irrigation, on winemaking, on grapes that they could grow, just to say like, I'm done. And Liber Pater, who's one of the most highest price of wine in the world, is actually in Bordeaux, but it's in Vin de France. So like he doesn't want to have any boundaries to what he can produce. So yeah, you've got this between collective and individuality dialogue relationship that is completely helped and pushed by modern technology. Yeah.
And what's the impact of, you mentioned this choice of leaving an appellation? Does it have an impact actually on the perceived value of the wine and on the price in auctions also, for example?
I don't think the relationship is as direct as that. So an appellation is a structured framework so that everyone can do the same and collectively grow the name Burgundy, and then within it Meursault and or Montrachet, this kind of thing. So it's a structure, right, to give you guidelines so that it's not a gazillion amount of people doing crazy things here or there. Leaving an appellation is actually a gesture to do the exact opposite. To say I want freedom to do the wine I want with the grape I want, etc. And so this freedom is both sides, right? It's good when it's creating something exceptional with a good winemaker, good storytelling, and it can be a certain degree bad because it means that the appellation is not helping collectively to grow. So if I'm a nearby producer, I will like, hey, why is this guy living? I mean, we help him for like 50 years, and now as soon as he starts to become famous, we out and so on. So it's a complex debate, which, you know, I think it case by case, but it's very complex between collective and individual actions.
And what's the role of, and what's the impact of actually an auction price and the results of an auction on these kind of assessments? So before we were mentioning, of course, an artist might disappear, a wine might disappear. How does it work? I mean, if an auction goes bad or if an auction goes well, I imagine most of them go well, but if it happens, what's that impact on the fluctuation of the price?
That's a very good question. So the auction, the only thing that it's giving you the level of interest in your wine or in your in the said vintages. We've got variation per vintages as well in the future. So from the past and into the future, right? So, and it's just the present point. So it's a level of love, effectively, and a level of price. So it's giving to the producers a kind of trajectory. One auction, not meaningful. Many auction, then it's starting to give you a trend up, a trend soft, a trend down, and it's giving you the way of which your bottles and your previous vintages are being shared and exchanged. I think there is a dangerous zone when the auction is actually selling your bottles lower than your primary markets, because it means effectively that clients, wine lovers, people can find your bottles, usually with some maturity, with some rarity embedded, lower, cheaper than the retail. So your retail will becoming much more difficult, and then you will start to, again, like in a love relationship, you will start to feel less love here, whereby it was a question of price. So when it's up, fine, you can continue your journey, you can continue to have your allocation to sell your wine, etc. And the producers, to be honest, they're looking at auction more often than not, right? I think them are the number one people registering into the auction just to be able to see the prices. So I think that's a relationship that's in place here.
And we were speaking about like new brands that might emerge. On this podcast, we had a lot of producers which are not like typical wine producers. We had some natural wine producers, we had some low alcohol, no alcohol producers. Do you see those products actually at some point reach the level of the fine wines that we have today?
Well, yes and no, because it depends on the liquid, the product, and the producers. So yes, because guess what? Domaine de la Romanée-Conti is a natural wine, is biodynamic. Guess what? Domaine Leroy is a natural wine, is biodynamic. And guess what? Henri Jaillet was one of the first wine producers to do that. So effectively being closer to nature, whether you want to call that biodynamic, organic, or whatever, is part of the trajectory, and there is no way back here, right? So it's effectively not the main turning point here. The real question is the rarity and the aging potential. So if it's rare, fine. Auction as a mechanism will help this rarity. And if age is giving an additional element of taste, then it helps rarity by default, and then it helps the prices as a consequence. When you take, for instance, no alcohol wine, I don't think, and I'm not sure, they can age. Might be wrong. It might be my misunderstanding of the content of the product, but I don't think they can age. If you're thinking about someone producing as good as it can be, it's not a question of taste here, and you will notice that I've never said the word good or bad. But if someone is producing a liquid that can be replicated, as some spirits, for instance, where it's more a recipe element, then there is nothing at auction, right? So auction rewards the rarity and the time.
Okay, interesting. So I would like to move to, let's say, the final section of this interview, which is what I like to call the quick fire. So I know we're Italian and French, so probably
Quick is not
quick
part of
conversations are
DNA,
not for
right?
us.
Impossibile, Giovanni.
We can try. I think we are more people to get a glass of wine and have a 2 hours lunch, maybe. That's a bit of a better setting for us.
Exactly.
But yeah, the idea would be, I would ask you some questions, not necessarily linked between each other, and I would like you maybe to answer, like, really, in a few sentences, give me your point of view on these questions. So my first one is actually a question we asked to everyone on this podcast, and we had some really interesting points of view, so I'm curious about yours. So let's say tomorrow you wake up and you see an email saying that you inherited a winery, and that would be a winery with a lot of tradition, also a lot of budget. So which would be the first 3 things you do tomorrow morning?
Okay, easy one. Well, I wish to receive that email. First one, I'll invest heavily in the nearby charity. Every one region has a charity. I had the chance to be the head of Hospice de Beaune, which is the biggest wine charity event in Burgundy, but same applies in Bordeaux, Champagne, everywhere in the world. So we'll be number one there because wine is meant like that and a good vehicle. Second, I look for the best team, starting by the winemaker, but not only in the vineyard, etc. Because without talent, there is nothing you can do. And the third one, I invest in hospitality. I think a wine domain and a wine estate should be a welcoming place. So to have good times with good people. So it's easy, but that will be the 3 things I do if I receive that email. Please don't hesitate to send it to me, by the way.
I wish I could. So recent news, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, the new Michelin guide for wineries. What do you think will be the impact of that on the wine market and also on the auction market in your specific case?
So funnily enough, I was in the room at a beautiful restaurant called La Tour d'Argent in Paris for that event. Listen, too soon to tell. So my understanding is that they're going to store and to rank the producer, regardless of their cuvée, etc., based on an important element, which is consistency. And so, well, on many other elements, but they will rate the consistency of producing good wines, which ultimately is good. I don't think there will be any immediate consequences because the wine lovers and people that know wine, they will probably look on cuvée by cuvée type of element. But again, love the Guide Michelin. They've got a proven record for restaurants and more recently at hotels. So we'll see.
This is actually my personal curiosity. What's the craziest auction or sale you made or you saw in the market?
Well, I had the chance to have many worldwide records. I will probably, and it will be hard to be beaten, I will probably say the 2022 Hospice de Beaune wine auction, where I was the head of the auction, and it was the biggest wine charity auction in the world. We break the record by 2 times, posting a casual 32 million euro, 100% going to the Hospital of Beaune. And so, yeah, we break the record by almost 2 times. And it was absolutely insane and crazy. But hopefully I bring that to the hospital because I was close to be one of their guests that day.
So it was 32 million for the whole auction.
Yes.
And the most expensive bottle?
The most expensive bottle, so like the Hospice de Beaune is a cask auction, so it cannot think in bottle. The one I personally sold was in a charity dinner at the Claude Vougeot, whereby a single small bottle of white wine called Montrachet, they said domain, went for 180,000 euro, 100% for charity. And I break my own record for a white wine, which was before 90,000 with the same bottle. So it has double to the same bottle, and it's still, as of today, I think the highest price paid for a single bottle of white wine.
And people actually drink those. I think I would think twice of price before drinking a 180,000 euros bottle.
I think they do. I don't know for that one specifically, but I think they do in general, yes.
So, since you see also a lot of different markets internationally, if you could say one market that might be the future for exports or in general also for the wine market, what would you say that is?
Well, I think the future is clearly in the Middle East region, not than a single market. First, because they're starting from, a smaller base, but also because they're attracting a lot of talents, a lot of investment, and a lot of new companies. So being the Emirates, being Qatar, being Saudi Arabia, Kuwait to a lesser extent, the whole region is actually a place of international meetings, of international encounters. And to be honest, we never found better than wine to connect human beings. And this is the fastest growing region. It's well documented for Dubai, and it's starting to become so more and more. Of course, you've got a religion and a culture to respect, but this is becoming an international place with international people, and not only the local with a strong religion. So within the respect of the culture, I think it's going to be a fastest growing place. Yes.
Did you see or intercept one consumer trend or a change in the market that you think fine wine producers are mostly ignoring and they actually are not ready for in the future?
I think the global deconsumption is the elephant in the room. We will collectively, as a humanity, drink less, and that's good. I think we'll tend to drink better because we're going to value the moment much more than any of our ancestors. And effectively, I think they're capturing it relatively well. There is one thing which is a higher price point. I think the new generation won't be ready to pay more than a certain amount on the drink. But if you sit in an understandable and casual price point zone, I think, you'll do great. Everything super expensive with no reason will fall because we'll have access to information. So we'll be able to compare, we'll have much more access, much more easily. So fine for the top hands because that's time which gave their value. Fine for the comfort done of the good product, well priced. And I think everything below like the quantities of cheap wine, I think will disappear from our radar in less than a generation.
So let's say I call you in a couple of months, hopefully, and I tell you I want to start actually to invest in wine. Where would you advise me to start investing? In which region, in which wine? I mean, is there a target which is, let's say, more suited than others?
Yep. First, I will ask about your taste, your age, what you want to like, what you want to do. Again, investment is a secondary nature, but still, I think you look for a region that are on the high. So like the Loire Valley, for instance, Italy. I'm a personal big fan of Italian wine, as you know, Giovanni. So anything, especially Piemonte and Tuscany, but outside of that region as well. You've got beautiful Abruzzo, you've got beautiful wine everywhere in Italy. So look for the name that are on the eye. So again, Loire and Italy are probably the two spots I will look for. But then more than that, producer names. You're starting to have some in Switzerland, in Germany, in Spain as well. Look outside of the natural region, but have a kind of like diversified, if you want, portfolio. Use some strong names, primarily Burgundy, Bordeaux, Champagne, and then add some cool element, cool aspects out of it. But so that would be my suggestion. And then we'll need to have a lunch, a dinner, or an aperitivo to discuss that in details.
Looking forward to it then. So the final question, and this is also a question that I ask for myself because one, I make a culture, and second, I know what to choose. So, what's your favorite wine that you have ever drank?
Well, the next one, all the time. The next one is my favorite one because I'm walking through the discovery pattern. But no, like one is again a good capsule for memory. And I've asked my wife, 20 years ago in Tuscany, in Fiesole, so which is overlooking Firenze with a a bottle of Biondi Santi from the vintage of our first meeting, and like the wine, the moment, the time, and of course the nature of why we're here is emotional. So each time I'm having that bottle, I remember about that moment, and I think that's what again fine wine is made for, is to have some remembering there. But yeah, I think that this one.
I love it. Then Amayés, it was a pleasure. Thanks for being on the show.
Giovanni, grazie mille ancora. Merci beaucoup.